I realized that Human made a video on this topic not too long ago. That is the topic of reproduction or having children. But beyond that, because of a number of encounters I've had over the past few years, I wanted to add my own 2 cents to the topic, and maybe some of you will find it useful or interesting, and maybe not. And as always, I'm sure there's going to be some disagreement. It's a sensitive topic, to say the least, reproduction, having children, having offspring. But the first thing I want to say at the outset of this video is that it's not a sensitive topic to me. Now, whether you believe me or not, I generally am a very detached individual, which is to say, I look out at the world and I don't feel particularly strongly about anything. And there are pros and cons to that. And so my enthusiasm as a consequence is oftentimes throttled, at least to a degree. But the flip side of that is that I'm able to take a step back and look at things in a careful manner and offer some scrutiny. Not making the claim I'm objective. After all, I'm just a relatively hairless ape and just as dumb as every other ape. But I can look at things detached from emotional attachment, or at least to the best of my ability. And whatever the issue might be, I generally do this. That is my modus operandi. I take a step back and I look at it. And so it should come as no surprise to anybody when I'm talking about reproduction or having children that I'm completely detached from this topic. For one, I don't particularly like children. I never had an interest in children per se as a phenomenon, never had an interest in having them, and although I can already hear the caterwauling, the cascade of voices saying that when they're your own children you'll feel differently, I don't think so. In that sense, I mean that I think I would be a quote-unquote responsible progenitor. I would take care of them, feed them, clothe them, teach them what I knew, if anything I have to teach is of any value. But I would simply see them as the consequence of an act of copulation and the typical thing that organisms tend to do, propagate their DNA. Now, I don't want to put it as crudely as Coltrane once put it, and I'm paraphrasing. He said something to the effect of, goats have children too, but in essence it's more or less the same thing. So when I think about the matter of children and offspring and propagating my DNA or DNA propagation in general, I don't have strong feelings whatsoever. If anything, on a personal level for myself, I'm not interested and never have been. But that is not always sufficient. At least it's not sufficient to people that feel that urge or that need or that desire. And that's why I'm making this video. I want to go into some of the details here. One of the issues that Human brought up, or topics he covered, was whether or not he should reproduce. Now, should, would, could, these are things that are not particularly interesting to me. For my own part, I don't think I should reproduce, not least of which because I have no desire to do so. But even if I had the desire, my desire would be somewhat curtailed by the reservations I have. Some of those reservations are related to health issues, potential negative mental outcomes, etc., etc. Meaning to say that my children, my offspring, might have problems that would negatively affect them and lead to negative life outcomes just by inheriting part of my genome. And that's something that I give thought to and think about a great deal. Other issues, I don't think I'm smart enough, and I certainly couldn't afford children. I do not have the financial wherewithal to have children, and frankly speaking, I don't have the health, given various health issues I have, to work myself to the bone in an effort to support children. I don't see the trade-off there. It's just not worth it. But the way I look at it, at the end of the day, is something like this. I am what people might call a philosophical nihilist. And I want to say before I proceed that there's a lot of conflation as to what nihilism actually is. A lot of people, particularly in traditional circles or alt-right circles, think that nihilism has something to do with hedonism. I can assure you it doesn't. It doesn't mean I'm a hedonist. I don't drink alcohol, I don't do drugs, I don't engage in any of the typical activities that are related to hedonism. No, philosophical nihilism is very simply the belief, based on, I think, observable evidence, that you cannot extract inherent meaning from the universe. The universe seems to be this big thing that just has stuff that happens in it, but it doesn't happen for any particular reason. Reading something into that beyond what is observable seems somewhat foolish to me, although I understand the desire. So here we are, stuck in this meaningless universe, and as human beings, we can only do what we've always done. We create meaning for ourselves. And meaning is not encapsulated in one activity or a series of activities or really your entire lifetime. Every little thing you do has some sense of meaning to it. If you happen to have plumbing skills and there's a busted water pipe in your bathroom, the meaning behind what you're doing is try to address that problem so you can live with a greater sense of comfort. If you're missing groceries, there's meaning behind you going to the supermarket. Sometimes you just want to enjoy things. Sometimes that involves, yes, consuming alcohol for some people, drinking a coffee, playing a video game. So we create meaning for ourselves. And sometimes meaning is extended beyond a few moments. And this is where I think offspring come into play. Children give people a sense of meaning. Beyond the raw desire to see one's DNA stretch across the generations, that is what they do. They give people a sense of purpose, meaning. They give people a telos, an end goal, as it were. But I don't see this end goal as very distinct from any other. I see it merely as a preference, a human preference amongst many, many others. I don't see any overarching significance to it beyond one choice of many that people can make. And I don't begrudge people that choice. I think it's great. If people find meaning in reproducing and having children, then more power to them. What I do not agree with is this notion that we have some sort of moral obligation to do it, or because it's quote-unquote natural, and I'm talking to you, appeal to nature, that's what we should be doing. No, we do things in life as human beings to create meaning for ourselves and for people around us on occasion, and having children is one way of doing it. But frankly speaking, and some people might not like the analogy, you can also create meaning by cooking a nice meal, going for a walk, going to the gym, working on a project. And whether or not it's perfectly analogous to having children is irrelevant to me. People do things, generally speaking, because it gives them a sense of satisfaction, and the meaning is created from within, which is to say, human beings give meaning to things. And I want you to think about something. Let's think about a universe that only had rocks in it. A gigantic universe only filled with rocks, no conscious matter, such as ourselves. Would there be meaning in that universe? Because I contend that meaning or purpose can only be meaningful to conscious reflective matter, such as ourselves. A universe devoid of conscious entities and sufficiently intelligent and sentient entities at that will have no meaning de facto, because meaning is not an inherent property to the universe. So you could think of some universe that had all manner of microbes in it, that is, living organisms, very simple organisms, some of the simplest in some cases, but a universe only filled with microbes as its contribution to living organisms is not going to be a universe filled with meaning, because to the best of our knowledge, microbes do not have the capacity to reflect or to think and create meaning for themselves. Arguably, it really is this idea of meaning and purpose and significance, arguably, really is confined to the highest echelons of mammalian life. You might argue that some primates, in addition to ourselves, we are primates at the end of the day, such as chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas, might have some notion of abstract meaning, although probably not purpose, probably not telos, maybe certain dolphin species. But even then, it's a bit of a stretch. We simply have no evidence for that. So for the time being, the only observable creature that can construct meaning for itself is the human ape. And children just fall into one of those categories of helping to construct your meaning. Yes, certainly, it serves a biological purpose. You're propagating part of your DNA, and typically that's what organisms strive to do, attempt to do, but I don't see any higher purpose to that other than another avenue to give you a sense of purpose and meaning, and then if that's your purpose and meaning in life, that's absolutely fine. But here's the thing, and here's the issue I often take with people who insist on this being the singular an all-encompassing purpose in life. And I've talked about this in a video where I address the problem of self-extrapolation, namely, people working within the framework of their own minds and attempting to extrapolate from their own framework onto others, and insisting that their own framework is uniquely applicable not just to themselves but to the entirety of the world. And let's be honest, because having children, procreating, propagating DNA, however you want to put it, however you want to term it, because it's such a common practice, a near universal practice, this gives license to people to think that it must be universal and that each and every person must engage in it. And it never escapes me when I listen to people that I am engaged in conversation with on this topic, how, frankly speaking, butthurt, angry, offended, incensed they are when I tell them that for myself it simply doesn't apply. For whatever reason, I stand outside the paradigm. And it is a very common paradigm, perhaps the most common paradigm, to reproduce, to have children, to pass on your genes. But for a variety of reasons I've talked about in the past, over the years I've been around, and in this video, it just isn't for me. And I would be the last person, very much a live and let live person, as most of you probably know, to say, because I do this, you too must do this. And yet, it almost universally seems to be the case, with a few exceptions I know, that people who insist on having children for themselves extrapolate from themselves and insist that I do it and everyone else does it. That's fine. They're welcome to that view, but it's not a universal. And I would take recourse back to the likelihood that there is no inherent meaning to the universe, and it's just another avenue towards meaning as a sentient ape. Now, a lot of people then take umbrage at that and say that's very reductionist, and it belittles the endeavor of having children. But let's be honest. Let's really be honest about our predicament. We're a bunch of relatively hairless apes, some more hairless than others, admittedly, hurtling about on a mud ball in a tiny, tiny solar system in one of likely 2.3 trillion galaxies amongst billions and billions and billions and billions of stars, probably even more planets, and people are actually trying to make the claim that having children is the overarching purpose to reality itself. I've encountered these people, by the way. Maybe you don't fall into that camp. It's just silly. We have no significant presence in the universe. And that is part and parcel of the reason of why we have to create meaning for ourselves. We have this tiny, tiny, tiny blip of time that we have accorded to us. We call this life. And we try to make do with it, and there's a lot of suffering that's involved, and sometimes a bit of joy in between, and it's a mixture, and some people suffer more than others, and some people have more joy than others, and some people have better lives than others. But the reality is we're all in the business of trying to create meaning for ourselves. We're all in the business in trying to move ahead with some sense of purpose. And sometimes it's easy to lose that sense of purpose, sometimes it's easy to lose the meaning, and that's oftentimes, at least, when things come to a halt, when people feel depressed, when they feel besieged by reality, because we have to actively pursue that meaning. We have to actively seek it out. It doesn't just come to us. You could argue in some sense that the meaning found in offspring or children is something that just comes to people, and that's a function of their biology. But that doesn't always work. There are plenty of depressed parents without purpose or meaning, and inasmuch as they do support their children, they're doing so out of a sense of deadened obligation. That is, they feel dead inside, they don't really feel very much, and I've encountered these parents, but they do it anyway. Now, that's not meaningful, and that's not purposeful. That's just doing what they feel is right. I suppose, as Porton Jeterson likes to say, yes, meaning can be found in responsibility, but that's neither here nor there. So that's our predicament as hairless apes that are not particularly bright, but have a smidgen of intelligence, stuck in this tiny speck of a planet in this very small solar system, in this very limited galaxy. That's what we're stuck with. And here's where the open-mindedness comes to play. Why not keep an open mind? Why not simply acknowledge that that is our predicament? And if some people find joy or meaning or the desire to forge ahead because they have offspring, be it 1, 2, or 20, More power to them. But that doesn't mean it's universal. These types of universals likely do not exist. Very, very likely do not exist, given our predicament, given the nature of reality itself. So if you want to have children and it makes sense to you because it gives you a sense of meaning or purpose, more power to you. I cannot join in that. And I think one of the reasons why I'm able to maintain this perspective is because I am just detached. I'm not trying to read meaning into things that simply isn't there. I do my best to look at the big picture, the picture of the cosmos and where we fit into it. And that is the struggle. Anyway, I don't want to ramble too much on this point, but that really is my take on having children. I just see it as a preference for creating meaning amongst many, many, many other preferences. And I think they potentially can all have equal value. Some people get meaning out of cooking. Some people get meaning out of drinking. Some people get meaning out of playing video games. Some people get meaning out of having children. And in the case of having children, you could say it's a longer-term investment, but the time and length of the investment here is relevant. We're all doing our best to get by in this life from point A to Z, and we do it in different ways. Some ways, such as having children, are more common than others, but it does not mean that some mandate offered to us from on high, from the Creator, or from the universe itself. To each his own, I say. Anyway, I will check you out later if I'm still alive. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week, and as always, may the gods watch over you. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.